from you,
welcome to the planning committee.
Yeah, that's one of my
Not to be
better ones.
confused with the programme on the television as well. Right, item 1, the minutes. Is it your wish we sign as correct record? Councillor Paul.
Apologies, sorry, can you do apology?
Yes, you talk.
I haven't got to apologise yet.
Oh, I'll catch up with you when we get there.
Okay.
So I apologise for apologising too early.
Anyway, you're happy to sign the minutes as correct?
Agreed.
Agreed? Right, apologies, Councillor.
Yeah, page 2 of the minutes.
No, apologies first.
Councillor Malcolm Longley is poorly unwell
Okay.
and sends his apologies.
Thank you. Clark, is there any more?
Yes, Councillor Robertson, Councillor Smith and Councillor Gilder.
Right. That will be 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's about right. Yes. So all correct otherwise. Right, members' interest. Right. Party with your arrangements.
No, Chairman.
Right. I'll explain. I'm sure you know what it means, but we don't get together on a party basis to vote on planning applications. There are some applications withdrawn. There are 2 of them. When I get to the absolute page. The first application is in Yalvertoft and it's 045. And the second application to be deferred is 0804, which is in Farmstone. So we're down to 3 applications tonight.
Agreed.
Right. I'm sure members of the public know this, but if the fire alarm bell rings, please go out the way you've come in. Please switch your phones to silent. If not, we've got a tradition of paying £5 to the chairman's charity. The proceedings are being recorded. Speakers will have 3 minutes, then asked to be wound up if they don't. And that's the only opportunity to speak, so please don't interrupt the rest of the debate. I'm sure you won't. And as far as clapping, cheering, hissing, booing, it wouldn't matter if you did, but I'm sure you won't. There's not enough of you to make a difference. And you will see officers talking at the same time as you, which looks like bad manners, but they're trying to get an answer to the point you're making. You've all had an update on the performance from Maria anyway. So we're going to the first application then, which should be Abbey South.
Thank you, Chairman. The application relates to the coach of horses and Warwickshire in Daventry and proposes the conversion of former public house to 6 flats with 3 used houses and a second-storey rear extension plus 3 new build used houses. Members will recall this application has been before the committee previously. It's actually identical to the previous application. However, following the resolution of that previous application, which was to approve, subject to a section 106 to secure affordable housing provision, a viability study has been submitted. That viability study has been subject to consultation with external consultees and has demonstrated that the proposal, if it was to provide affordable housing, would not be a viable scheme. And as such, applications presented to committee members tonight with a resolution and proposal to actually approve it without the affordable housing provision. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, John. Local member. Abbey South, there are 2 of you, aren't there?
There are indeed, Chair.
Who's going first? The lady says you, sir.
No, I asked him.
Yes, you told me earlier I was going to.
Yes, I like that. That's the best way around it. Right, over to you.
Actually, I'm not really happy about this. I think the planning application went through. There were obviously the provisos that this was about providing affordable housing. I think it was even spoken about at the time, and approval on the basis that there's an S106 agreement put in place for the requisite number of affordable dwellings, and we're now told that there aren't any, i.e. it's not viable, it's not sustainable in the current context. So I just think it just goes against the spirit of what we actually put forward, and I think these sort of things should be actually put in place before we actually grant the full planning permission on them, if that is going to be the case. And I'm not going to make any proposals on it. I'll just listen to it, hear what other people say around that. But I just think it's out of order that in my view it causes a certain amount of grief, and there should be mitigation with the conversion.
Thank you, Councillor Wesley. I think in a little while when we come back to the planning officer, she will explain why that hasn't happened, why the indication wasn't at the first stage. Councillor Evans.
Well, I feel quite a bit the same. I'm very disappointed that there's not going to be any affordable housing, because we do need them. We need them very much. And not having any on either of these two sites is going to make us miss out quite a bit. Can I ask you a question? There's been a viability study. Do we not see that? I mean, we wouldn't have to ask questions on it if we have sight of it, but we haven't.
I think fundamentally the viability study is a confidential piece of information, and has been subject to a consultation. The consultation is carried out by an external consultant who works on behalf of the local authority. So they're not working on behalf of the applicant. Us as an authority employ the external consultant to look at the figures independently to ensure the figures are robust and stand up to scrutiny. So, and they are the experts in reviewing these types of studies, and I think we should have little faith in their ability to examine and analyse them correctly.
If I could just clarify for you, Chairman, they are commercially sensitive, because the developers obviously gone and got the scheme costed and been able to make a case that it's not viable to proceed with the development, which is why they're one of the few planning documents that aren't in the public realm.
Is this not one of the things that should be decided before it comes to planning?
If I could just give a little bit of assistance on it, you'll find that most developers will not want to incur the costs of in employing a quantity surveyor, in employing someone to provide the quote in the first place, unless they're sure they actually have some reassurance that planning consent is going to be granted. It's then after that stage they find that they will do all the costings, obviously, because equally professional costs are also a contributor to those costs.
Seems a bit, like putting the horse before the cart. I think I'm going to have to go along with it. I don't like it, but I can't see any alternative at the moment, because it's already been granted. So I will go along with the officer's advice.
Is that a
I'll
proposal?
propose it if you want to.
Do you have a second for a start? At this moment you don't,
No.
so that proposition fails. Next person to speak, are you seconding that proposal? Right, so we have a proposal that
With the same feeling as...
the support officer's advice. You want to speak now?
Well, I have exactly the same feeling. We are not very happy, but we have also to think about what are the consequences if we refuse and if it goes on appeal. And it was agreed with three, and now this is not viable. It's not a situation we like, but except if the law change or if we do it differently, a lot of developers will be in the same position with the seal and the section 106. So it's a development with very small unit, which also Daventry need desperately, because we have 1 and 2 beds, and then it's a lovely development. Plus, it's a listed building, so the cost will escalate very, very quickly. So I can feel it. I'd rather have a beautiful development with no than something we stay like that for Daventry. It's not good, but it's not completely satisfying that we are missing on the houses. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got 4 speakers, Councillor Frenchman, Councillor Ritchie, Councillor Poole and Councillor Chandler. Councillor Frenchman.
Thank you, Chair. Where to start? This committee is made up of elected officials that represent their constituents. We're given a pack of notes at every meeting that has every bit of information we need in it to make a decision. When it comes to a viability report, we're not given any information, and we are left to take the word of whoever it is that has said something about it, that it is agreeable. We sometimes go against officers' advice. Therefore, I think it is only fair that we get to see these viability reports, whatever you say, because it's going against the public benefit, then these documents need to be public. And if that means that they prevent developers making these spurious claims about unviability in the future, then I think it's well worth making them public. If officers and the council are not courageous enough to make them public, they should at least be provided to members of this committee as pink papers, because we are capable of looking at these figures and seeing what the viability is for ourselves. I would also say that in planning law there are a lot of things we're not allowed to take into consideration, and often we talk about, well, that doesn't seem viable if somebody wants to open a pub or a shop, and we're told that's not a planning excuse, or it might affect the shop down the road, but that's not a planning excuse either. But it appears when developers want to, then they can bring in financial viability as an excuse. And if you watched the programme last night on Newsnight, which was completely about this section of developer shenanigans, it would appear that there are many wrinkles that developers can pull in order to make a development appear to be unviable. And it's not our problem if they've overpaid for a site or overpaid for other elements of building a house or a development, that we should suffer that our constituents don't get their affordable housing. So I think I've made my position clear on that. On 2 other points, can we ask them for some affordable housing? We've asked for a percentage, why don't we just have 1 or 2, if that, whatever the percentage, whatever we feel we can, or are they going to make a sizable contribution towards our housing, affordable housing pot?
Viability assessments and some other documents are not part of, because they are commercially sensitive. The same as if there was if we had a farmer making a...
Sorry, I can't accept that. We are elected officials, we are trusted with sensitive information, and nothing can be commercially sensitive to the extent that we cannot see it to make a sound decision on it.
Well, that's our legal lady. Have a word.
Yeah, I think your officers understand your frustration, but it is, unfortunately, they are commercially sensitive and we cannot make
Says
them.
who?
No,
I want an answer to this, because
let's explain then.
but commercial sensitivity isn't a law. It isn't a something that says you go to jail if you let this out.
Well,
it's just the developers not wanting to release the figures.
I think we do understand your frustration, but they are commercially sensitive, and they are, which means that they cannot be made public in any way, shape or form, and they are submitted as sensitive documents. And what your officers do for you is, we then employ somebody who's an expert to go with a fine-tooth comb through all these figures, because we don't understand the commerciality of it, but these people do. So we employ somebody at quite a lot of expense, the developer's expense, to go through these with a fine-tooth comb to make sure that they are telling the truth and they are putting figures that are reasonable. And behind all that, we have the advice in the MPPF, which is very clear on how we have to deal with viability, and in particular with affordable housing. And we are advised that we must be sensitive to viability, we must accept viability arguments, particularly in relation to affordable housing. Now, Unfortunately, on a site like this, which is a conversion, conversions are much more expensive to develop. It's unfortunate that they didn't come in with this when we first looked at this application, but it may be that they simply have done the figures and found out that there's no way that they can produce this. They've produced those figures, they have been assessed. I think it was a district audit, Maria, was it?
The district valuer.
But district valuers who actually assessed all these figures for us, and they go through it line by line. In terms of what they've paid for the site, unfortunately MPPF advises that it has to be a willing seller and a willing buyer. So it's basically the market rate for this site. That's what we have to take into account. We can't say they've paid too much or too little. It has to be the market rate, and that will all be done through that viability assessment. And I think and then we are where we are. Obviously, we have to take all the advice, all the central government advice. We have to take the viability, and obviously the officers were presented with the outcome of that.
I still do not accept that we are not allowed to see the figures, even if it is on pink papers. We see sensitive commercial information all the time through strategy and other committees. I cannot see why we cannot see this now. Also, commercially sensitive is not a legal definition. It's not a law that you can't break. So I don't understand. You can say anything's commercially sensitive, and it's just a smokescreen for developers to hide behind.
Right.
I mean that's the position with. I mean, at the moment we've got community infrastructure levy. If this application had come through before we had community infrastructure levy, the only thing the developer would be, its certain cost would be the Section 106 providing the affordable housing. SIL is applied in a blanket sense per square metre, and this is a SIL liable application. So if you'd have got, pre-SIL, the affordable housing may have been viable on this scheme, but post-SIL, because of the square footage and all of which, because it's currently a commercial building, it's fully becoming residential building. So all of the new 10 units, or every square metre of that is SIL liable. So the only thing that can be squeezed when it comes down to viability, in this case and in most cases, and this is happening countrywide, is the affordable housing. Ultimately, if we find this is happening a lot, if members are feeling that, more often than not, there are unacceptable viability arguments, then one way you can potentially address that is by looking at the SIL 1, 2, 3 list. SIL is, once it's set, but actually what members decide to do through council, what to spend the SIL 1, 2, 3 on a SIL 1, 2, 3 list. You could, of course, decide when we're unhappy with the way this is going, and that you could make a strategic decision about investing in affordable housing to bring it through some other way. But as that's a decision for council, what we have to do at planning committee is go with the advice of the experts that have been paid for, and you have to have our assurance that
we haven't, because we haven't seen it, so we want to make our own minds up on that.
Sure.
I'd also say we've been duped by the developer, because we've granted planning permission before the Section 106 was agreed, and I think that's a situation that can never happen again.
I think, through you, Chairman, this is always a possibility. The guidelines in the NPPF are very clear that we are not allowed to, if something is not viable as a development, it is our duty as a local planning authority to work with the developer to make it viable. If that means reducing some of the policy burdens, like in this case, then we are required to do that to make the development acceptable.
No, but we may not have given planning permission in the first instance if we'd known that.
Through you, Chairman, we are required to, by the NPPF, take into account valid viability assessments, and that is what's been done here.
And through you, Chairman, in addition, some of the viability statements which you've seen throughout the district, they actually sometimes, yes, do result in less affordable housing being produced instead of what's in our JCS. However, in this particular case, what we're being told by our own consultee, who has been paid to do this work, that there's no affordable housing should be provided, because any affordable housing would result in the scheme not becoming affordable. And in addition to that, some schemes might actually have a commuted sum to provide affordable housing elsewhere. Again, in this particular case, it's deemed to still make the scheme unviable.
I
Thank
think
you.
fundamentally, Chairman, through you, had the application been submitted without affordable housing provision, that application would have been unlikely to come before members, because as officers we would have queried why there was no affordable housing provision, and then requested the submission of the viability assessments in any case, and hence we're in the same position as we are today.
Okay, Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Chair. I can be brief because I agree almost entirely with Councillor Frenchman on this one. If there's any issue in which we don't agree, is that I would not be content if we were merely talking about let's sort of look for a compromise over the extent to which affordable housing should be included in this. We haven't seen the consultant's report, but I don't believe it. I'm not suggesting that the consultant is not professional or has acted with integrity, but in terms of what are the questions that should have been asked, I just find it almost inconceivable that in a place like this, we're not talking about a prime location in Daventry. This is an area of very ordinary housing all around about. And if that site cannot be developed in a way that offers affordable housing, then I suggest that the developer needs to go back and come up with a completely different scheme in which there is affordable housing. We talk about, yes, things have got to go with market rents, but we influence market rents if we say that, you know, that they can go ahead in an area like this without any allowance of affordable housing. I just feel that we must say no to this.
Thank you. Councillor Paul.
Thank you, Chairman. Couple of points. Councillor Frenchman mentioned pink papers and the commercial sensitivity therein. If matters are on pink papers, then invariably they are held in camera. If we come to viability, if I can just bear with me. Research by Shelter has claimed that a legal loophole which allows developers to build fewer affordable homes has contributed to a big shortfall in such properties. A rule in the National Planning Policy Framework lets house builders use viability assessments to prove that building the required number of affordable homes in a development will dent its profit, and that it can be proved anyway. So it goes on, but that was under a freedom of information. Why don't we allow viability? Well, to me it's not rocket science. I have to agree with the proposer, I agree with the seconder, with their sentiments. But if Harry Builder says, I can do this for 50 bob, and Bob the Builder comes along and says, I can beat that, we are in an awful, awful turmoil. I totally trust the assessors, and you know, builders are there to make money, provided they're not making excessive profit on the properties, which the valuation and the assessment would be made. I'm comfortable with the viability question. I'm uncomfortable about the whole development, purely and simply. I go back to parking issues on the zebra crossing almost, etc., etc.
We can't deal with that here.
Exactly. So I have to go with officers' advice for the reasons that the proposer and the seconder has mentioned, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Paul. Councillor Chaplin.
Thank you, Chairman. I have very little to add. I think none of us will like it,
No.
but and it is becoming clearer in the public domain that this is happening. That may lead to some change, but as things are at the moment, we have very little choice.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Wesley.
I do agree with Councillor.
Thank you. Just let me speak again. It's just to clarify a few points, and I just want to say some words, because I actually think, if we can't see the viability study, we should actually see the report that is presented so we can actually understand at what level it is, and that should give us some information. And I really think that would be minimally helpful if we could see the presented report and the conclusions that it actually come. Because it would seem that there is there's supposedly 3 houses on this site, and we're not getting any of them, and it would seem that there's a possibility that there could be one, and we don't know that. We don't know whether we don't know in that report whether basically the organisation said, well, yes, there's one viable property in there as affordable housing. We don't know that. And the other thing, just to go over it, I mean, when we're deciding on planning applications here, you have to weigh up all of the pros and cons, and sometimes there's a straw that breaks the camel's back. And this may have been it if we'd have been up front. So I think we need to be smarter on this, and I think we need to be smarter as members here. We need smarter advice. And I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you. Before I carry on, I'm going to add my 2 pence. I too have the same feeling as Councillor Frenchman. It annoys me considerably that there's no affordable housing here. Where I differ from him is I accept our solicitor's view and our officer's view that it can't be made public, the report. And even if it was public, even if it was on pink papers, do you think that we are competent, have better knowledge than the district valuer would have to assess the situation, who's assessed it independently? Although it annoys me greatly for the reasons that everybody that's spoken against part of it, I'm afraid this is the second one we've seen. We saw another scheme 6 months ago or a year ago whereby affordable housing was reduced dramatically to just about nothing because of viability. And I think an officer said at the time, as the seal gets bigger and the 106 gets bigger, the cake gets smaller, and what goes is the affordable housing. Anyway, there's my 2 minutes. I don't usually have 2 minutes. When do we get to Councillor Wesley, Councillor Irving-Swift next, then Councillor Parker.
Yes, I would just to say, one councillor questions the professionalism of our valuer, and I think that is very unwise. Because our solicitor did explain that he went with a fine comb to look at everything. So I think it's very unwise to question the quality, and if you do question the quality, you have to have something to support it. Secondly, as I said, it's a grade list 2 houses, and even if you are a developer, I have a grade list 2 house, and I promise you, so the cost can escalate so quickly that it's really not funny when it's my house, but when you're a developer, that can put you into bankruptcy. And thirdly, I like everybody, we don't like that, but it needs a change of law, or we need to do something in a strategic level for that not to happen. We don't have that, and if it goes into, if we could refuse it, they can appeal, and I will remind everybody that would have been a major application. So for those reasons, not liking it, I have some reservation, but for those reasons I would go with official advice.
Thank you. Councillor Parker, and after that I think we're going to get to a vote. Councillor Parker.
Through you, Chair, if I may ask the solicitor a question, if you don't mind. I understand about all of this. Can you tell me, please, if I was to look this up where we can't receive the information, could you tell me the law it refers to? So I can make a note of it.
Through you, Chair, I put my hands up to say, because commercially sensitive, where is that defined? And
Yes.
I have to say, off the top of my head, I'm afraid I couldn't help you with that. But it might be something that we can go away and report on. I know that it is nationwide that these commercially sensitive information are not released publicly, and they are assessed independently always.
I understand that. I'd be really grateful, I think the committee would, if you could go away and tell us where it actually says this and the law and everything else it refers to. I think that would then give us some comfort. Because if there's a law, I'm okay with that. If there isn't, then I'm not okay with that.
Thank you, Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Chair.
You're very, very black and white.
Exactly.
That's what I'm driving.
Yeah, it is.
Anyway, we'll find out the answer and every member will know. Councillor Patrick, very, very quick.
Yeah, just one question, Chairman. The papers say it's in the conservation area, but the building itself isn't listed. Is that right?
Yeah.
If you look closely, I think the building is, but the back isn't.
So the building is, the front is, but the back isn't.
Yeah. I think you can see it on there. It's yellow, the actual building is yellow, but the rear of the building isn't. So it's the building itself, the current old building is in the conservation area, but obviously the area at the rear where the mews are proposed to be built isn't. So it's conservation area.
Okay. Right, we have a proposal of the
I'm
application.
sorry, is that so it is listed or it isn't listed?
No, it's in the conservation area,
Yeah.
which is very similar to being listed.
Right, we've got a proposal of the application be approved. All those in favour, please show. 1, 2, 3.
So you seconded it?
1, 2, 3, 4. Right, you're clear. Those against?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
The application is not approved.
Well,
Right.
the motion is.
Sorry?
Motion is defeated.
The motion is defeated. So I need another motion now. Councillor French.
I would like to defer this until we've seen the valuation report.
That's not going to happen. So,
No, you've been told that we won't be seeing the valuation report, and it's not proper.
It's made a competition, I think the problem.
Well, it doesn't endear me to it, although I support your view. Okay, you've got a proposal. Do you have a seconder? Okay, I'll take Councillor Patchett. Those in favour of deferring it till you see the valuation report, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Casting vote against that. So where do you go now? Councillor Ritchie?
Chair, can I ask if there is any other action we can take other than saying that we outright reject this application? Can we defer
What you've been told by Maria is that you could consider that the amount of sill that's being got from this you could use for affordable housing. If the council had the stomach to do so, it could say, because we've lost out on affordable housing here, we would like to use X amount of pounds of the sill that will be generated from this development towards affordable housing in general, in Daventry, or whatever. That would be the way to achieve some of what you would have achieved had you have had the affordable housing element. So in other words, the applicant would be paying sill, but you'd be using it for affordable housing.
Through you, Chairman, as well. The affordable housing with SIL are exempt from paying SIL if they fill in the correct forms and do all the correct legislation-wise regulations. However, because now it's not affordable housing, they'll be paying SIL on all the units. I know it's not conservation, but at least it's something.
Councillor Charter?
what you suggest, Chairman, about the sill being deferred or
No,
transferred?
the sill could be used.
Yeah, that's
Just
not
to-
a decision for this
No,
committee.
No, it's not.
to clarify, that is a decision for the full council
Yes.
when it reviews the 1, 2, 3 list.
That's what I
And
thought.
you would have to, I would expect policy team colleagues to have evidence that that is so.
But there's nothing wrong with this council, with this planning committee, if it wishes to if it wishes to suggest to council that it could consider that. There would be nothing wrong with this committee doing that. Councillor Ritchie?
Thank you for that explanation. It's an interesting suggestion. I do, however, feel that this development is in an area where people who are not on large incomes ought to be able to afford to live. I therefore like to propose that we reject the application as it stands.
What reason?
We need a planning reason.
Chair.
It doesn't meet criteria for requirements for affordable housing.
No.
And through you, Chairman, your officers have very firmly advised you that that is not a planning reason that we would be able to defend in an appeal situation. If members were minded to go through that and we lost an appeal, not only would it impact on the performance indicators that I report to you each month, but also I would have to advise you at this point that it is likely to lead to the loss of new homes bonus, because that is likely to come in from next April. So at this point,
Okay.
I would have to advise you, and it's not defendable, and it would have a financial impact on this council, which is a requirement for me to let you know.
Right, I've got hands everywhere. Councillor Eden first, then Councillor Wesley, then Councillor Frenchman.
Thank you, Chairman. Can we say that we agree with officers' advice on this and ask them to take into account that any CIO that comes out of it will be put towards affordable housing in Daventry?
That's what I would personally support, but I don't know whether the committee would support. We recommend to council that that's what it does. But I don't know whether the committee would support that. The next...
Does the seconder agree with that?
Yep.
Well,
Seconder of the original proposal?
It's a new proposal.
it's got to be a new proposal now.
Yes, to clarify that, you wouldn't say planning committee can't make a decision on still income, but the council can. So if you wanted to make that recommendation to go to consideration to officers to put to council, then there's no reason for that.
At least we might get one.
So there'll be a proposal to approve the application with a recommendation to full council that part of the SIL money is used for affordable housing in Daventry.
All the silver.
All the silver. How much silver is there generated by this?
Ish.
And £20 per square metre.
No.
Well, I don't know.
I can't tell you the exact amount, to be honest. But however, because now there's no affordable housing provision, the whole development is still liable.
Is it tens of thousands or just
Per
100?
prop, no, I would think it would be more than £10,000 per unit.
Per
Well,
unit?
it depends on
the square metre.
square meterage, and also because it's within the town centre. It's not like the rural zone, which is a lot higher, so it's potentially not as much. It won't be as much as what you would get in the rural area. It will be less than that.
Is it one of these that shows square metres?
Is it something you can come back to the committee on at a later date?
Yeah, we can clarify it. I mean, it won't be £10,000. It will be somewhere between 10 and 100, I think. That sounds
I really couldn't confirm, but fundamentally, the whole site would be still liable, and that doesn't change.
So no exact amount, but there are indications that if it was 10,000 a unit, it would be 10 units, it would be 100,000, but it could be less than that, obviously. Right, the next person to speak is Councillor Wesley.
Yeah, what's that proposition?
Well, did you make that proposition? Sorry, Councillor Adam, did you make that proposition in the end?
And I second.
Right, have you got a seconder
Yeah,
for that?
seconded by the original.
Right, Cecile,
And
you're
a point of
seconding.
order, Chair.
Actually, Councillor Richards right. He made a proposition to reject the application before the council.
All right, you made the proposition to reject the application. I thought we'd already voted on that.
Well, we've already voted on it.
Okay, do you have a seconder? What was the reason given?
Criteria, we wouldn't be able to defend it on appeal if it was for the reason.
No, the planning reason.
The planning reason was it doesn't meet.
Policy page 2.
Right, okay, do you have a seconder? Councillor Wesley, you have a seconder in that?
Yeah, Chair, because because just on the reason, can I just so I'm absolutely sure of this, because just looking at page 16, paragraph 4, reasons on the details of the proposal. It says it resolved that the Planning Commission should be granted subject to conditions in the Section 106 agreement to secure affordable housing in line with policy H2 of the Joint Core Strategy. I know we've had a report that says that
that wasn't possible.
that wasn't possible, but the Planning Permission was still granted on that basis.
That's right, and that's why it's back here again.
I understand that, Chair, and I understand, but on the basis, and what I'm saying is when people weigh up everything, all of those factors go into the thought process. Now, if there was an extra factor in there that just pushed it over the edge, then it might not have got planning permission in the first place. And I think it's perfectly reasonable to go back and say that is not a satisfactory agreement on S106, as we've already stated at the original planning meeting. If it's new information, that is what we actually said at the original planning meeting. That is what we said.
Okay, so you've seconded the proposal and seconded the proposal for the planning reasons. All those in favour of a refusal for those reasons, please show. Those against? Right, that is lost. Now back to you, Cecile. Sorry, Cecile. I'll call you Councillor Edmund instead. It's the French accent, I was getting confused. That is a proposal then that planning permission be given subject to a recommendation to council that some of the sill be used for affordable housing in Daventry.
All of the sill.
All of the sill, you're saying that?
Can I just clarify that the section 123 list puts money in broad headings, so what you'd be doing would be saying any money lost anywhere where there's a viability assessment, you would work out what that is, and there would be a new pot within the 123 list. So it won't be site specific, because the 123 list is not site specific, it's district wide. So that's, just to be clear, that's what you'd be recommending.
Okay, Cecile, you're seconding.
I second, and can I add, it's quite clear in that room that no one liked that, but with the law as it stands, with the what the seal has indirectly produced that sort of behavior, so we are all in agreement that we don't really like what he does. So I think with that proposal, if we could do something with the 6103, and I remind councillors that in fact we were sent a little things to read all about seal. It was sent to all the villages and say to the councillors that please do read that little document, because if it's £200, the seal is £200 per square metre per villages, if you are not. And 200 for the town is much cheaper. I don't know if it's 75 or 100, but that is the order of magnitude per square feet or square metre. Sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Franchon.
Thank you. It's quite positive what we're saying, and I'm just wondering whether, as a slight addition to the proposal, there is somebody in government we should be writing to as well to express our concerns at this.
Through you, Chair, I think that would be the appropriate avenue for that would be a motion to council.
I agree.
Yeah.
In fact, you're just the man to do it, I would think.
And secondly, I feel that this is something that scrutiny and improvement probably could look at as well.
They can't look at planning, can they?
No.
If you look at affordable
Right,
housing viability.
Yes, sir. Sorry, Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Chair. It's not the best way forward to defer this application until after the council, so we know which way the council will vote on this, on the money or not. You know, so we know where we stand basically.
Well,
No.
it's not each way yet, so...
We run the risk of an appeal against non-determination, which would have the same consequences.
The alternative is, if you don't determine it, you run the risk of non-determination. That's going to cost us. So they'll probably get it anyway. If you refuse it, and if it went to appeal and was successful, you could get costs against you, and also it would be a very big black mark against you, against your planning performance as well. I don't like it any more than the people that have voted against it like it, but I can see the logic of why it has to happen, unfortunately, and I can see in the next year you'll see it again and again and again. I'm sure you will see it. Anyway, we have a proposal.
Chair. Just,
Sorry?
can I say, almost on a point of order, we all need to take account of the advice and the information that we are given by officers. We are here to make up our independent minds on proposals, and I sometimes object to the way that we are told that we cannot do things because of the risks. If it was the case that we didn't have choice, there would be no point in us being here, and I just feel that a little bit more respect needs to be shown to the integrity of the council, of the committee, to reach its own conclusions.
I'm sorry, Councillor Ritchie, but the comment you just made, I don't like very much. We employ a solicitor to give us that information. That's what this person is paid for. That's what this person comes along to give us that advice. These officers are professional officers, all doing their job. They're here to give us advice. That's what they've always been there to do. You made the decision after they've given you the advice.
My point is, having received the advice, it is our job then to take on board that advice and reach what is the committee's view, and not the view of officers, not the view of the chair.
Chairman, I totally agree with Councillor Ritchie, but the point being, if our officers miss any fragment of advice, such as costs or anything going forward, it will be deemed that we have not been transparent. Sometimes I don't like being told that this will cost this and that will cost that and it will go to appeal. But I'm a big boy, I can make up my own mind. But officers are there. I go back to a report of strategy which caused so much controversy under my portfolio, and it said within that report that people don't want it. Yeah? I would have loved to have taken it out, but if I'd have taken it out, that would have taken away all the transparency. What we have here is a totally transparent planning committee, officers and solicitors. I am with you that I can vote whatever way I wish, having given that advice. But if we wasn't given that advice, we would suffer.
That's exactly right. Thank you, Councillor Paul. Right, we will now have a vote. We've got to, you know what the proposition is, to approve the application whilst asking full council to consider giving the sale money to affordable housing. All those in favour, please show. Those against? Right, the proposition is approved. On a lighter-hearted note, I thought this committee would be efficient.
Well, agreed the next one anyway.
The next application is Walgrave, and the number is 0739.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a site within the open countryside, and as you can see by the photos, the site is currently in quite an unattractive state, to say the least. There is currently a greenhouse on the site and another existing outbuilding on the site. As you can see, they're in a bit of a disrepair state, and it's currently being used as either a dumping ground and also used as a builder's yard, as you can see by the amount of material is on the site. This is a proposal for the removal of the greenhouse and the extension and conversion of the existing breeze block building to residential to dwelling. The proposal also includes the construction of a detached garage on the greenhouse site, but it's obviously a lot smaller than the greenhouse. The alterations are considered small scale in keeping with the existing building and also the locality. Although the proposal will result in residential development in the open countryside, you also have to consider the fallback position of what is there at present and the impact it has existing on the wider locality. It's not exactly a site which you would expect to see in that sort of location. There is an argument the proposal would accord with JTS policy R1. As you can see, the proposal would lead to an environmental improvement. It is noted that within the report it does not state that community engagement has been undertaken. However, it is clear within the applicant's submission that this was undertaken, and there is an argument it does accord with policy R1 and also 3. Regardless of whether members consider it in accordance with policy R1, it's considered the proposal, given its small scale, yes, it's an unsustainable location, but the greater benefits of the character of the locality outweighs those harms. Therefore, it's recommended for approval, and also members' attention is drawn to late representations which talk about some conditions following highways are fine. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. We have a speaker, Mr. Hammond.
Thank you, Chair, councillors and officers. I'm Roy Hammond and I speak on behalf of the applicant. I note the officers' report and welcome the recommendation contained therein, and I'd just like to thank Mrs Daniels for highlighting that we had actually undertaken a community engagement event which was omitted from the report. That being the case, I'd just pick up on the concerns raised by the Parish Council. The amended plans required by the local highway authority have been provided, and subject to the access improvements being secured by planning condition, the local highway authority has no objection. This is a unique site in the district in terms of its history and the type of building, and I don't agree with the Parish Council that any precedent would be set by granting planning permission. It has also already been explained to the Parish Council that the applicant has no plans for the wider land other than to use this for agricultural purposes or potentially equestrian, but that would only be on a hobby basis. It has also been explained that national and local planning policy would prevent development of the wider site for anything other than a rural-based activity. In summary, the proposal would bring about substantial environmental improvement on the site, and the proposal has been subject to an effective community engagement exercise meeting the clear requirements of policy R1 of the core strategy. And in light of that, the planning committee is therefore respectfully asked to support the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hammond. No local member, so Councillor Ellis.
Yes, just one thing. I thought, could we add that we withdraw development right on that side? I thought it was on the condition, and I can't see it.
Yeah, not with 3, it's condition number 5.
What is that?
Okay.
Okay, so that means that you have withdrawn development right.
The proposal before you is quite small scale. It's a single story property, so and of course it's in the open countryside. So what the removal of permitted development rights does is give us the control to make sure any alterations that are proposed, if members do approve it and it does get built, we have the consideration on the impact on the character and appearance of the surrounding area.
So with this clarification, I would like to propose we go with officer advice. Thank you.
Thank you. You have a seconder. Councillor Paul, do you wish to speak now?
No, I'm happy, Chairman, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Frenchman.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just clarify something on the history of the planning? The 2006 application 0814. It doesn't quite. This is change of use of greenhouse, restroom and toilet accommodation and land for storage purposes. So they were seeking to turn it into a storage area,
Correct.
which they appear to have done,
Yeah.
which was refused and the appeal was dismissed. So what enforcement action was taken?
I believe none, to be honest. So in some cases, unfortunately, there's these cases which do split the net. We can't enforce against everything, but obviously if anybody does see anything out there which potentially hasn't got the planning permission, then yeah, please bring it to our attention and we will investigate.
Because the reason I say that is there wouldn't need to be an environmental improvement if the site hadn't been used for a reason that they were not allowed to.
Yeah.
That's not storage, that's dumping.
Through you, Chairman, we believe this is at least, this site's been used like this for at least 18 years. So it's likely that it would, if they submitted a certificate of lawfulness, we'd have no choice but to issue it, which would resolve the current situation, whereas the application before you seeks to do so.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Councillor Wesley.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's a little bit along the lines of Councillor Frenchman, but there's two things. This environmental improvement, again, we're giving people carte blanche to make a real mess of somewhere and then to say, I'm going to fix it by building a house in the middle of the countryside. And, you know, and you know something? We're saying that it's going to improve the countryside, but those people could actually still use it as a dumping ground, couldn't they? They could still actually build a house on it and chuck all their rubbish outside the front door. And there's nothing we can do about it, apparently. So, you know, when we're saying that this is an environmental improvement, there's no substance to that in a case where somebody's obviously deliberately made a right mess of it, so they can actually say, I'm going to make it nicer tomorrow, so can I do what I want? They're not really not happy about the way that this works at all.
I think it's unfair for you to say that somebody's obviously made a mess of it.
Well, somebody's obviously has made a mess of it,
well,
Chair.
I mean, what if it was dumped down? It wasn't the applicant that was doing it.
Well, that's not, well, somebody's still made a mess of it.
Yeah, somebody has.
And apparently it's been going on for 18 years, and apparently they asked permission to do it, and we said no, and they've done it anyway. So that's what it is.
But I believe that within those 18 years, nobody's complained about it.
Through you, Chair, obviously you know the well-known planning phrase, each case is on its own merits. Now, sort of, in this particular case, you've got buildings on site, whereas potentially another site which has got storage of cars, storage of other things, which potentially hasn't got the benefit of planning permission. Now, there are other controls which are available to try and clean sites up, either through a community protection notice or through 215 notice. However, at the same time, you've got to have a look what the fallback position of this site could be if they submitted a certificate of lawful development, which we would, depending on that information, submitted to us, but it's unlikely we would be able to refuse it, but again, depending on the information, then it could be a storage yard, a builder's yard, uncontrolled. So it's sometimes, yes, we normally, in normal circumstances, we would say no to this as residential, but on this particular case, having considered all the history, what it's like at the present moment, it's only why we were recommending approval. So it's that balancing, and unfortunately sometimes one way tips greater than the other.
Thank you very much for that.
Okay. If there's no more comments, yes, sir.
I did have my hand up, Chair.
Sorry, it probably wasn't up high enough. I didn't recognise it.
Well, whether in view of the last two contributions, whether I have further comments, but I do share the same concern that if the only reason that we feel that building here would be justifiable is because of the appalling state, whoever is responsible for it, it doesn't actually strike me that the best way of resolving an awful mess in the countryside is to build over the top of it. I just feel that I think as Councillor West was suggesting, that, you know, I would hate us for giving a go-ahead on the basis that the present area, the present site is so awful. I assume that the site belongs to the applicant, that whoever it belongs to. I would have thought that if we were really concerned about environmental improvement, we would not be talking about building here. We would be talking about taking whatever enforcement action we can do to avoid that area simply being used as a dump.
Okay. It's through you, Chairman. Again, sort of, we can't take enforcement action again. Something if it becomes immune from enforcement. It clearly shows on page 30 that records indicate that the site has not been used for agricultural purpose in excess of 10 years. And in addition, there's an existing building on site which is being part converted and part extended. The other building, the greenhouse, is being demolished and a smaller building for a garage in its place. Yes, now if you're thinking about constructing a new building on a piece of land which was potentially untidy, doesn't, obviously that will be considered separately on its own merits, whereas what's going for this particular site is it's got a building on site, its history, and what it would do to improve the character of the locality. And in addition, I know Councillor Wesley spoke about the joint core strategy and the environmental improvement. That wasn't hit, the joint core strategy wasn't hit 10 years ago. So we didn't have that sort of policies in those days. So it's only when times come along and policy change, such as we used to have a policy that we didn't really like conversion of agricultural buildings to residential, but now we've got Part Q which pretty much allows for that. So even though potentially we didn't like it then, we've also got to go with what's before us at this particular time. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Chapman.
I just wanted to point out, Chairman, that as far as I can tell, this would count as previously developed land. We now have a statutory obligation to list all such sites for development possible, development. So the system is stacked against us.
Right, Councillor Edmund.
Yeah, just a quick word. It does look a mess at the moment, but if somebody's willing to convert and extend that building and build a garage, they're not going to leave all that mess outside their door when they've spent an awful lot of money. So I think this could be converted quite nicely and the site cleared up. And I'm sure DDC will make a note of watching it anyway.
Thank you. Right, we have a proposal that the application be approved. It's been seconded. All those in favour, please show. Those against? 1. The application is approved. Right, the next application is 0929, as in, well, we've got Abbey Sale and Abbey North. It can't be both, can it?
Yeah.
Can it? Does it straddle it though?
No, it's already not
I think the entrance is on the boundary.
Well, the road cuts it out, but
Yeah.
all the field is in.
It's not on the boat.
So is it Abbey North then, really?
No, it's in Abbey South.
No.
It's
Right,
categorically.
Yes.
it's in both.
You can talk to all of us.
Okay. Anyway, officer.
Thank you, Chairman. The application actually relates to the temporary car park which was used as a construction compound during the construction of the Icon Centre. The application before members tonight seeks to retain that overstilled car parking as a permanent feature. You'll see from the report that normally in cases where there'll be loss of playing field, there's been no significant impact as a result of the loss of this particular small area. It could be argued that the retention of this particular area of car parking has actually facilitated further use of the playing field, which has become a meeting area for those who do the park run on a Saturday, because they also meet at this particular point. Obviously, members have the information before you tonight. Primarily, the applications before members, because it is a DDC application. The only concern officers do have is concerns regarding the actual boundary screening, which we feel can be improved, and as such, there's a condition of the recommendation for that provision. So subject to those conditions, the Chairman will recommend this application be approved.
Thank you, Chair. Right, no speakers, local members. Who's going first on this one? Right, okay. You're going first then, Councillor Ed.
Agreed.
Yeah, I agree with this. It does need making a bit more secure. I've no problem with it going on. I mean, you've only got to look at photos to see how much it's used. If we don't go down the icon, we always park on this bit. It does need a little bit of TNC. There's still plenty of ground. There's not that many people get down there to play or sit, etc. That you can say that it's crowded. So I'm quite happy to accept this, and I'll propose it if you want to. No, I will propose it. We've got to follow officer advice.
So you're proposing
Yes.
approval. Do you have a second? I think Councillor Charlton was just a fraction before you, Councillor Paul. Will you wish to say anything, Councillor Charlton?
Briefly, yes, Chairman. I use this space whenever I visit the Icon building, and as a wheelchair user, its current state makes it very uncomfortable to use, and I've been looking forward to it being tidied up and so that it's more comfortable to use.
Well, I know people have indicated with their hands, thank you. So you're second here?
Yeah.
Right. We've got more local members. If it's Abbey North and Abbey South, we'll go to you first, Councillor.
Thank you.
And then we'll go to the Councillor North now.
Just don't see what comes
So Councillor South first, and even Ward South.
Thank you, Chair. It's a difficult one. Just looking at that, there's a late representation there, isn't there? I've forgotten actually, because it was actually granted as a temporary car park for the construction of the icon. So it was I don't think it was intended as a proper car park according to that. I may be wrong on that. Obviously, it has eaten into the green space on Eastern Way, and eventually the plan is that most of Eastern Way disappears, obviously. So losing there is a loss of green space, particularly when it's all gone. Obviously, even that small bit would be quite useful. Saying things like, yeah, it's not jam packed on there isn't really the point of open green space. Open green space is about being able to use space like with balls and dogs and things like that. However, we do have parking issues in Daventry, don't we? And so I'm actually torn on this. But as I go on and on about parking all the time, I think I actually have to support officers' advice on it. But I would like to see it. I would like to see it tidied up because it is a right old mess, to be honest, and it's really, really detrimental to the Icon building and the green space as is currently presented. So that's what I've got to say.
Thank you. Right, now Abbey North, Councillor Carr, then Councillor Richard.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm totally against this proposal. I have to say I go against officers' advice. Mainly the reason being is there's a multi-storey car park across the road which is never full to capacity, so I can't see why we need this car park at all, and I think it should be put to a better use. You know, and anybody who wants to use the Icon building, use the car park across the road.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Richard.
Thank you, Chair. My understanding, which I meant to check before coming to this meeting, is that the boundary of Abbey North goes all the way down Ashby Road. So I'm not quite sure if this has got anything to do with me in a war.
Well, you've got a chance anyway. You've got a chance to go.
However, my first objection is to the comment, perhaps not accurately quoted, from the Crown Prevention Design Advisor, saying that there is no objection to the retention of this piece of waste land as an informal car park. That is not a bit of waste land. It's perhaps has been made a bit of waste land by the treatment it's received in recent years. But we're talking about a bit of what was an open playing field recreation area. And a car park like that simply doesn't belong there. Of course we have the problems of parking, and parking problems are going to be greater in the town centre as the size of the centre, the size of the town increases. But we need to plan what we are going to do to accommodate cars within the centre. It's not that long ago that the strategy group, and no doubt rubber stamped by council, decided that that money that was going to be allocated for town centre parking was going to be put back a couple of years. I'm just not at all happy that this bit of ground is used, is used as a solution to a problem that this council is not addressing. So for that reason, I am not in favour of the application. I recognise that that there is a problem, and that if in a few weeks' time that bit of parking area was not available, it raises big questions about where people are going to use their cars. Okay, there might be a little bit of space underneath the retail park, but not a great amount of space. There is pressure on finding places to park around there. I would like to ask, is there any way in which permission for this area to be retained as a car park could be given, but only say with a space of 12 months until alternative arrangements can be made? If we were doing that, I would not be interested in planting around about it shrubbery and everything else. After all, it's not that long ago that the council decided to remove the shrubbery just at the opposite the entrance to the road up to the District Lodge Road. Shrubbery takes years to establish itself and suggest that you're planning something that is permanent. I don't want to see this as being permanent. I would like to be as temporary as it possibly can be.
Through you, Chairman, if you look at page 47 of the report, it does, the planning, it might not be explicitly clear in there, but those 3 planning applications have effectively, in the past, given it 3 lots of temporary permission to be used as a temporary car park. So I think going back to, I can't remember how many years on there. Yeah, 2009 actually, the initial one, when the Icon building was constructed. So I think comes a point where it's not really temporary anymore.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Frenchman next.
Yeah, I'm just actually going to echo the same point as Councillor Chandler. I can't see any plans here for resurfacing the car park. And it strikes me, having used it a few times, that it is not in the best condition. I read it, I didn't see it. Does it say?
Yeah, condition 3 relates to the boundary treatments. Design materials and type of boundary treatment. So condition 3 seems to relate to the boundary treatment.
I think this is an issue which I did raise with, excuse me,
Sorry.
understand members' concerns about surfacing on this particular site. Equally, regarding the visual impact of this particular site, not so much the use, but the visual impact it currently has, particularly having regard to policy GA2, where we seek to ensure that any developments do enhance or reinforce the local character of the area. And I share those sentiments. And I think I'd be happy to add to condition 3 details of that of surfacing to that if members are happy to accept that to the proposal.
Natural. It does look a bit, the surface is not that good, is it?
I think because it was always intended to be a temporary car park, and in light of the proposal before members tonight, I do feel that, yes, we could proceed on ensuring that all the hard landscaping is looked at as well.
I would appreciate that if the proposers are happy to accept that.
I'm sure the proposers would be happy with that.
I would certainly welcome that.
Yeah, you should make that point.
Okay, well, we've got more speakers yet. Councillor Patchett next.
I was just thinking, you know, Jamie, when I first got the papers and read this, I thought, crikey, has it been 5 years already? It seemed not long ago that we discussed this, and I remember the discussion at the time was that, well, okay, we don't like it, but we don't mind it being there temporary. But I noticed that this particular proposal doesn't say there's give a time limit, and I would have thought that perhaps another 5 years temporary permission would be the right thing, as we've done in the past. Yeah, that's my suggestion.
Okay. Councillor Evans, sir.
Yes, no, just one thing. When we are on planning meeting, I would like that we all stick to planning reason, because we could all go and start to rumble, but I do believe that unfortunately we are here for planning matters. We might not like the system, but we are not there to rewrite history. So please, could we stick to the argument? And if you do not have a reason to go against officer advice, we should not take time because we all want to go home. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I normally take half an hour and finish with a song, but I'd like to know. Icon. It is a temporary car park, and it's temporary until such time. As Chairman, I do apologise. I must declare an interest as a portfolio holder for economic regeneration. To that end, I will not vote, but I'm allowed to offer one or two suggestions. The Icon actually pays for allocated parking within the Undercroft car park. So that is one. Two, there are disabled parking bays under the Icon. Before Councillor Charter bites my head off from behind, unfortunately, he cannot open the door to get to the lift because the wheelchair gets in the way. So whilst they do have disabled bays, I will take that up with people, shall we say. The other thing is that it is a temporary car park. It is what it is. You don't have to park there if you don't want to. And at the end of the day, it will be used. The whole of that area will be used, with the exception of the village green, for Site 3 water space. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Paul. Right. Oh, you want to come back quickly?
Yeah, just one thing. I didn't know before we got the report, but I just want to make sure that everybody else knows what the crime prevention officer has said. And this down here, because the road goes down into this car park and there isn't much of a fence around it, it's been used by travellers to get onto this site, onto the grass.
Only once.
And anything that they can put round there to deter them, I'm for it.
I'm sure that could be
So we bear
noted.
that in mind, Councillor.
That will be noted.
They could
Right,
also
we have a
look at the other
proposal
end.
that the application be approved, which has been seconded. All those in favour, please show.
With the amended condition.
With the amended condition.
So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Those against?
Could it be recorded that I abstained, Chairman?
One, yes. And one abstention.
Is that 7 then? Yes, that's been
One
7.
abstention. I've got the abstention down. Councillor Paul.
7.
Right, that in fact concludes the very long meeting. Thank you for attending, gentlemen.